our awesome moderator is having some technical issues. So I'm sure like he's super stressed out right now, but we want to make sure that we kick it off and we get started. So I'm Emna Ghariani. I'm originally from Tunisia, born and raised 100% Carthaginian product. And I'm the founder and CEO of Veamly. Veamly is like an executive assistant for the software engineer. It shows them their top important messages, remind them to take a break and take a deep breath, and shows them data on their work patterns, all in the goal to help them be balanced and more optimized. I throw the ball to you, Bassel.
Hi, my name is Bassel Ojjeh. I'm in Palo Alto, California, originally from Syria. Have a startup called LigaData. We've been around for 5 years, and we've been virtual from day one. So we have employees in about 13 or 14 cities around the world. We do data analytics for mobile operators, and excited to be here and see any questions you have. I've done a few startups, some failed, some done well, and some still going. So happy to share anything that could be helpful. Mohammed?
Thanks, Bassel. Hi, everyone. I'm Mohammed Musa. I'm founder CEO at Deepen AI, and we build tools and provide services.
Feras, I was just calling you.
Oh, here we go.
Excellent.
It's okay. We're going through intros, Feras. Don't worry about it. We'll just come back to you. So Mohammed was going through his intro, and then we'll talk to Feras, and the leadership will go back to you. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying we build tools and provide services for autonomous vehicles and robotics industries. I'm like a true mix of what you call Shami, like a Palestinian, Syrian, Jordanian, a little bit of Turkey. So kind of a very mixed DNA, the whole Bilad Sham combined. Yeah, I've worked at 3 startups before I started Deepen. I also spent 6 years at Google. And all the 3 startups that I worked at had a really good mix of okay, bad, and ugly exits. So what you shouldn't do, and I've kind of personally affected me over the 10 years where I was in the startup industry. And over to Feras.
Thank you, Mohammed. Apologies for the delay. My MacBook is having problems that I've never seen before. Obviously, it has to time and coincide exactly with kicking off this event. My name is Feras Mousilli. I am managing partner of a boutique law firm called Lloyd Mousilli. We specialize in startups and intellectual property. And the 3 founders here also happen to be clients of the firm. So I'm intimately familiar with their businesses and admire them as executives tremendously. And we've got a really very, very impressive panel here that have a breadth of experience that we're hoping to be able to share here. I am calling in from laptop. So I've just got a bit of a technical snafu here with being able to share the deck. But that's the beauty of tech and presentations. You have to be able to work on the fly. I just wanted to ask Emna or Mohammed, and if any of you can actually share the deck. I don't have it on this laptop.
I actually clicked share, but it's not letting me share because I received a message from Megan, but it's not letting me share.
Okay.
Maybe you have to be a host.
I might be able to share. Let me just download the slides.
Okay. Or for us, we can go ahead and
absolutely.
I think
we can start kind of just setting the stage here for the conversation that we're about to have. The title of the session is Breaking Up and Making Up, Founder Fallacies and Fallouts. Any startup, any business enterprise is going to have its personality issues, its power sharing issues, and obviously money issues. So we were hoping to address these issues from a high level to be able to give you a little bit of perspective on some of the mistakes that often are made, and how we can best address them to try to mitigate some of those issues. Can we end up skipping to just the that over the agenda slide, please, Emna?
It's Mohammed sharing.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to do the audience poll?
I think you actually have. This is the old version. The one that was on the WhatsApp was the newer version.
Oh.
So for everybody watching us, I'll say one thing while we figure out this. This is live. This is the reality of one of the, like when you're going in to do a demo, for example, at a client site or anything, and like all of a sudden nothing goes as planned. So you have to improvise. But the cool thing is the beauty of this panel is us, hopefully, and all the content we have. So Feras, we can, I think, just go ahead and do it without the sharing the screen. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you guys just maybe a little bit about the agenda here, right? So we're going to talk about monetary disputes, equity distributions, and compensation issues. We're going to talk about power disputes, relational disputes with the board, and then responsibilities for the respective executives. And then finally, talking about working with your co-founders whenever you have communication issues and when you can end up making a decision that, hey, it's actually in everyone's best interest to break up. So with that, I'll actually point to, just take a quick poll from the audience. When you think about equity sharing and allocation between 3 co-founders, what do you think is the best way to end up allocating that equity? Is it A, equally amongst the 3 founders, so 33% each? Is it B, based on a time dedication model? Or C, is it based on experience, their actual value that they're bringing to the startup, or investments? So think about that answer while we end up having, our speakers talk about equity distribution, right? I think we're on the poll slide.
What are they again, Feras? If you'd like to, I can type them in the chat.
No, we have them.
The letters.
There.
Oh, you got them? Oh, perfect. Sorry.
We have them up.
Okay. Yep.
And I'll leave those up to, the founders, and we'll, have you all kind of just chat and provide your thoughts on this, because we provide, the next slide is actually setting the question on how we actually ended up allocating. And we're seeing a good mix, right, of answers here. And we'll move on to the next slide and allow each of you to address it, and then we'll talk about takeaways. So how do you think equity should be distributed or redistributed when contributions become unequal? Bassel, do you want to start?
So I'll tell you from my experience. What we did is on equity, we created a vesting model, just like employees. So founders actually have to vest. And the idea there is that we don't know what the future holds for us. So if somebody, for example, gets an amazing opportunity or has an event, a life-changing event, then that will impact their contribution, and therefore, they will contribute up to a certain point, and then if they drop off, then they get whatever they get, and then the rest is not vested. It goes back to the company. So that's been a model that I've done in 2 startups and seem to have worked well. The other part that we did is we basically said we start at a certain point. So for example, everybody starts, let's say, with 10%. And then from there, we start looking at, does somebody have an investment? Then it adds to it. If somebody has experience, then they add to it. If somebody is foregoing their compensation while somebody else cannot, then that gets added. So in this way, the numbers at the end of the day won't be the same.
Excellent. So that's basically a mix of B and C is what it sounds like. Emna, any thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. And just to give a little bit of background for everybody, earlier I just talked about Veamly, but I also am a global director at the Founder Institute. So I have launched over 40 startups, and I've been through these conversations many, many times beyond from my own company. And I think choosing one answer is unfair, because I think each context is different. Like, so in my case, for example, we were 2 founders at first, and then I had started the company before. So we knew that we're not going to start equally on the same foot for that perspective. But the one thing I remember a mentor told me, he said, whatever he asks for, give it to him. And it's not it's not an obvious advice you get from everybody. And he explained it to me, and he's a serial entrepreneur, this mentor, and he had sold companies and everything. He said, the equity split is not as important as this relationship that's going to grow later on. And if your co-founder feels valued at this point, then you'll start on the right foundation. And so the most important thing I'll say for me, the lesson was, we needed to feel, both of us, that whatever we made a decision was fair. It cannot be something. And so there was a combination of things. There was the experience, the work already done, the work already put. Also, there's also the question between the technical versus the non-technical founder, and usually technical get less versus like the non-technical. So there's a lot of things. So I don't think it could be just, a point blank A, B, or C. The other thing also I can share here is there is somebody at a certain point who started kind of working with us, and we wanted to reward them. And we said, you know what if you join this? And I'll share this. Like we said, we'll give you 5%. And for us, we thought 5% qualifies for co-founder title. And that was like one of the things we had to learn. We're like, no, 5% does not make you a co-founder. Actually, it's 10% and above. And we realized like, we learned that what it means to be a co-founder versus also a founding team member, and how that equity split is versus a regular employee part of the option pool. So these are like,
that's an important point, just to be that sense of fairness, right? That people have to be able to feel that they are being adequately compensated. Mohammed, what are your thoughts? I know you may be a little bit contrarian given your background.
Yeah, I think like Bassel and Emna already added a lot of good points. Just to emphasize a very important point in any startup, or actually any kind of entity or initiative or venture that we as humans embark on, you need a leader, and that leader needs to have the legal capacity and authority to lead the company. So if you don't have an emir, what we call in Arabic, right, it automatically introduces more problems. And if you have 3 founders, just make sure that the leader has the capability or the power to lead the company, because otherwise you're going to get into these power dynamics, which is not healthy and not going to lead anybody in a good direction. And just around the fairness point, if the rest of your co-founders don't trust you to make you a leader, they shouldn't be your co-founders. It's just as simple as that.
And very, very well said. And it's a great segue into some of the other questions, right, and issues that we're going to have. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, can I add something? And it might be relevant here. Very early on, someone once explained to me the term Founderitis. So the idea is that people come in and they have a title of a founder or a co-founder, and somehow that becomes an entitlement. And that becomes really toxic for a company. So it's almost like a sickness. So you end up with a Founderitis where people go, well, I'm a founder, therefore somehow I have to be treated specially. Really, what you want to think about it is that if you founded a company, effectively you have an idea and you started a company, you and few of your friends or colleagues. And then at that point, you carry a title, and then your responsibility is based on that title, not based on the fact that you're a founder. I think getting that mindset of saying, if you're a CEO, your job really is a CEO. Your job is not as a founder. There's no job called founder. That's just like, that was back when you incorporated the company. So that's maybe also a mindset that might be healthy for when you start a company with others.
Absolutely. Let's turn to the next slide just so we can leave with a couple of thoughts here on equity. There really isn't a perfect model, and you'll see that it is an art. Some people end up having this idea that, hey, we want to make sure all 3 of these founders are equally vested. YC is a big promulgator of this equal equity distribution. Something else to just consider that our CEOs haven't mentioned, but there is a dynamic equity model There's a book called Slicing Pie that I usually recommend a lot of our early stage founders to read, that talks about tracking the value of contributions and time instead of just setting arbitrary percentages early on, because really it is, a bit of, a horse trading, something for something, and there really isn't an exact science to it within, the typical distributions. Let's move on to the next question. And I actually, just given our time here on compensation, I'm actually going to skip to the next poll question. So if we can skip the compensation, just given our time, we'll be able to share these slides with the rest of you. But next audience poll, number of board of directors. Is it even? Is it odd? What do you guys think? Odd being a great option to kind of break deadlock, and B, even to force collaboration and consensus building. So just a quick opportunity for the audience to weigh in. While you all are providing your responses, we'll set the question up here. Next slide, please, Mohammed. One back. The question is, how many board seats does your company have? How do you recommend that those seats be filled? And who composes those boards, and any learnings that you've had? And I'll set the stage that typically we're using our previous model about three founders, that typically every founder ends up getting a board seat. That has its advantages and disadvantages, and I'll leave it to Bassel to start off.
What we've done is we have an odd number, so it's 5. We have 2 co-founders and 1 investor. The investor asked for 2 seats. We have only 1 investor, and then 2 seats for us, and we decided to have 1 as independent. But also what we did is we actually reserved the 2 seats are not for founders. The 2 seats, only 1 seat is for the founder, and the other seat is for the CEO. So again, going back to what I said earlier, kind of getting away from the notion of a founder, we said that CEO needs to have a seat, and then 1 seat goes to the founder. So for example, if one of us depart, the 2 co-founders, then one of us will serve on the board, not both of us.
Beautiful.
That's what we did.
Emna?
In our case, we didn't give investors board seat. Because we decided to bring most of our investment from angels. And when we started thinking about the board, for us, first was odd for sure. Like, we want to have odd. Right now, we're in the process of bringing independent. I agree with what Bassel said. It's like getting away from the whole Founderitis aspect of things and just making sure that the company grows beyond the founder. And that applies, by the way, just to everything, not just the legal aspect. Most of the time when the company starts, the brand is the founder, versus for true scalability, you want it to be separated from the founders and be its own value and brand. So the odd number and then having the independent seat is the super crucial part for us.
Mohammed?
On our side, we every founder has a board seat. I think in hindsight, the board seat should be for people who can serve as board members, and not every person, like even the founder, even CTO, the VP engineering, etc., can be an effective board member. And sometimes investors can be a toxic board member, and sometimes the founder can be the best board member, right? So I'm not saying it's kind of written in stone type of thing. The thing that I just would emphasize now with all 3 founders at Deepen having a board seat, we all come from, we're different age, different expertise, different backgrounds, and so on, different communication skills and presence, and so on. So when you kind of have if you think of a public company, the board has to be a very strong representative, having the interests of the shareholders as the highest priority. And you want people who can serve that, not necessarily serving the needs of the founders, which is kind of what Bassel said, the founderitis, right? Yeah, that's my input.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn to the next slide where we talk about just recommendations, because I think you guys hit on them. It's a great distinction that needs to be made about what types of decisions, the board needs unanimous approval on versus a simple majority. And part of the things that we end up seeing are this balance on trying to build consensus to make sure that everyone, agrees, versus the ability to be reactive and quick and agile. So part of that is going to be best served by having folks that aren't founders and outside of the company, even maybe industry partners, folks that you can see that are strategic value, may very well serve as a great board member, just to be able to move away from the kind of internal politics that the founders may actually also be experiencing whenever they have a dispute. We're going to go ahead. We'll skip to the last poll question, Mohammed. We had two issues for each of these, but I think we're a little bit time crunched. And the audience poll question is this: would you ever leave a company because, quote unquote, the love was lost? A, no, business is business, I'm a consummate professional. Or B, yes, personality fit is crucial for startups. And I ask that because it's going to come up time and time again. And you'll see in the question that's posed here that inevitably, a startup is like any other relationship, and it's often best, paralleled with a marriage. You need to be thinking about the long term. You need to be thinking about what each person is going to be bringing to the table and what happens when those contributions aren't being met. So turning to the question on the next slide, I really want to emphasize this idea that, hey, the same way that a marriage may have a prenuptial agreement, your company needs to end up having a prenuptial in the sense of bylaws and company agreements that discuss what happens. So, I'll pose this question to you all. Actually, let's skip to the next question. Just beyond communication issues, because I think the parting ways question on breaking up is a great way for us to kind of have as a last question for the panel. Have you ever been kicked out of a company or had to part ways with a co-founder? And regardless of the answer, any thoughts on how you would have handled it differently now in hindsight? Bassel, if you want to start, just to keep us consistent.
I have actually. I was in a startup where all the co-founders got kicked out. So it was just it was like a movie, just part 1, part 2, part 3. There were 3 co-founders. We departed, and we had after 9/11, the economy just took a huge hit. There was a disagreement with the investors, and we ended up deciding to part. But again, we did it. It was done systematically. It's not a great feeling, and I think it's you look back at it, and in hindsight, would you do something differently? Not really sure, but definitely it's a great test of resilience. As far as you start something, you're putting all your heart and soul into it, and then an event like 9/11 happens, and then investors want to take the company south, you want to take it north, or whatever, east and west. And next thing you know is all the dynamics just changing, and you lose control. So I do think that in general, if anything, probably I would say is founders should consider that scenario and should consider what happens if that's what would happen if that scenario is to transpire, and what would they do, and kind of how would they handle it. That would be my my take there.
Thank you. Emna?
Thank you, Feras. I actually will plug into the poll, into the question. I will say I'll answer the poll myself and see B, absolutely 1000%. Like when we start companies, it's all about the why. You're building like in something for the world, a vision, you're bringing a vision to life, there's no point of staying there if you're not gonna really bring any value to the company if you're just doing it as a monotonous mechanical work. That does not make sense at all. So the point is, like, if it's okay to leave a company if you found it and you realize there are better people who can run it and grow it after you later on. Obviously not in the early days, but we're talking later stage. And when it comes to being kicked out, I've never been kicked out, but I've been through a co-founder breakup. And Feras, I know I promised you I'll say this, which is a bad co-founder breakup is worse than a divorce. If co-founding is like a marriage, a bad co-founder breakup is worse than a divorce. Not only have been through it, but I've been also through it as an advisor on the board of certain companies where it simply can kill the company. It's as simple as that. A company that works really well with incredible traction, with employees, you can impact people's lives, help, like, people lose their jobs. There's so many like horrible consequences that really making sure in the beginning that all these things are thought of and you sit down, you agree with your co-founders what would happen if then that is more crucial than ever. In our case, fortunately, it was not bad. This was a minor co-founder. It was a very it was not a nice feeling. It was not something good to go through. It was horrible as a communication aspect, also how to negotiate, because like they had to keep some equity, right? Because they had vested, but like, again, when you put a vesting schedule in the beginning, the classical vesting schedule is 4 years, but then as soon as a VC comes in, they're gonna make you start over from zero. And then in the beginning, like each company is different. Some companies, like you see them, the ones you see on TechCrunch, like within 6 months, they raised $30 million. Oh my God, no, but the reality is it takes 2-3 years sometimes to get to truly to the market and more. So that conversation was is very hard to have, and you really need to push to be fair and to be very data driven as well, right? Like, so for example, for us, this person, when we're doing transitioning, they had no documentation, nothing. Like they had nothing to transition. That there's no better proof to show you they didn't do anything. Anyway, I know you probably want to.
We'll come back to the vesting issue and about maintaining equity. But Mohammed, I want to let you answer.
I have not been kicked out, alhamdulillah. But when I first started Deepen, actually, I had 2 co-founders that I started with, where luckily we went through the exercise of trying to find product market fit before we actually make them as official co-founders. And within 4 months, we realized that whatever we were thinking was not going to work out. So they just transitioned out. And it wasn't a breakup per se. It was more kind of a natural taking different paths. And then I brought in the other 2 co-founders that are my 2 co-founders now. And we also went through this exercise of like, what are we doing? Is there a product market fit for how we want to work together? Can we work together? And we spent about 8 to 9 months before we actually made them on the board. And that was just a very fortunate thing, you know, that I think naturally, was not planned. I cannot claim that was planned, but it was, alhamdulillah, that's how it happened, and it ended up being the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's great. We have one of the audience members that's quoted Khalil Gibran Khalil, "Work is love made visible," and I think that's powerful. And just thinking through your drive as a founder in a startup, you're typically very poorly compensated. So if it's not a labor of love, it's a very difficult road to end up traversing, especially when you're looking at the 3 years plus that Emna was talking about for just an initial traction to take place. Let's turn to the next slide on just some recommendations, and then we can leave with some parting thoughts for the audience. If we can look at the next slide, Mohammed.
Yes, and also there are some questions coming from the audience.
Yep, and we'll hopefully try to address this in whatever time we have left.
Sure.
So, your bylaws should definitely outline steps for removal of a co-founder. Your stock grants, and this goes back to Emna's point about equity and having to maintain equity. A lot of times your stock grants can include a buyback clause during certain periods of time. So that's something else that you want to be looking at. Obviously, if you're organized as an LLC or a corporation, those company agreements can also include, a liquidation clause or a valuation. So on the next slide, we'll leave with a couple of takeaways, and then we can open up the questions. But just pulling on some of the comments that have been made here. Emna, breaking up or with a co-founder is harder than a divorce. Those are your company prenuptials. So it's critical to make sure that you have laid out exactly how you believe that procedure should take place. Something else a lot of folks end up missing out on, and this wasn't touched here, but I know it's critical just coming from an IP counsel perspective, make sure that you have all of the IP assignments from your co-founders and all of your employees, frankly, to ensure that somebody parting ways isn't also, leaving the company with potentially the company jewels as well. Bassel had talked about starting off at 10% and then negotiating up and down from there based on contributions. But it's also a best practice to just have everything vest, from zero, that you have to end up meeting certain time criterias, potentially deliverable criterias that are ended up timed to your vesting. We didn't have time to address employment agreements, but it's also a best practice to make sure that each of your co-founders and your executives have employment agreements in place. Your employment with the company is a different relationship from the equity that you may hold, which is also a different relationship from your board seat that you may hold. And divorcing the three is critical to understand how that relationship ends up moving forward or terminates. One last thing that I think is a really, really important procedure that we're dealing with right now for one of our clients is related to valuation. And the big question is, a lot of these templates that you end up downloading or clerky procedures, etc., don't have startup valuation policies and procedures in place related to setting what exactly the value of those shares are to do a buyback. So that's something that I think is really, really important to think about and to make sure that you've got some alignment on for all of your co-founders to make whatever process you step through a little easier. I'll pause there just to allow the speakers to provide any comments that they have for takeaway, and then we'll open it up to questions.
I can jump in. Actually, I was gonna say, there's only one question, Feras, and I would love to just address it as a parting thought, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Lama, just back to the comment in the beginning, see, you'll be my best friend after this. But this is actually a conversation that's very fresh. We were having yesterday with another CEO about working with family and friends in general. And the thing is, it really depends on the people. Sometimes it can go really well, or it can go really bad, because separating, like all spouses, for example, who co-found companies together, it's having the ability to separate like your personal life from your professional life is a skill that very few people have. It's very hard to switch it off to be like, I'm mad about work, and then, I'm not mad at you anymore because you're my brother or sister, or you're my dad, or you're my husband or wife or whatever. So for me, like, because I've done this with friends before, I've had great experiences and I've had horrible experiences. It just, if you do end up in that situation, you're really excited with a family member, you want to get something started, you still need to treat it like a business. You need to still do everything that Feras just talked about today, like any agreement, everything, and talk about the worst of the worst of the worst case scenario, right? Like something like, what if, you have your board and then somebody tries and come to kick one of you out? What happens, right? How do we handle that situation? So, and it's very hard in the beginning to think about all these things, but it's I would definitely like push for that. And I will end on saying, at the end of the day, you are doing something that sucks, but you love it. Like Firas said, it's hard. I say it sucks. It sucks so much to be a founder. I cannot even emphasize it. Like I know Mohammed and Bassel, if you disagree, but I will say like it sucks 99% of the time. For that 1% of the time that you're gonna see that impact you're gonna make on the world. So it's the worst job on earth, and it looks so glamorous. Like I'm amazed when people reach out to me with things like thinking, you know, misconception of social media, of what's really happening versus the reality of the day to day. You're always fighting for everything. Not fighting with people. I mean, like fighting to get traction.
I'll interject and say this is why Emna isn't a recruiter right now. So
no, like
I completely respect the sentiment. But just in the interest of time, I want to make sure that the other
go ahead.
speakers have an opportunity to close.
Yeah.
Bassel?
I love being a founder, getting something, finding it, figuring out what the problem is, and making it work. You tell me that versus a corporate job where I have to put 100 PowerPoint slides to some idiot to describe exactly what is my team doing and what's my budget. I'll take that anytime. So I do know what you mean, though. It is very difficult, but I do think that it kind of gets all your muscles working, and I do think it's somebody should always do that journey once in their lifetime. My parting comment probably is one based on my experience is the law is one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that the law is a stochastic process. It's a random process, meaning it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. If you have to go to the court, it's a random process. That doesn't mean whether you're right or you're wrong, it doesn't really mean anything. So you have to think of it as going to the court or getting in front of a judge or any of that is something you would not want to do. You'd never want to do. Yeah. So based on that, just work your way back from there and say, okay, assuming that that's never going to happen, now what do I do and what are the parameters that I need to set? Firas has some great points in the slides to just keep those in mind when you have that hard conversation with the co-founder. So that would be my parting comment.
And just to piggyback on that, I'm a lawyer and I hate lawsuits. There's nothing that you want to be embroiled in that's going to suck your time, your emotions, your energy, like getting involved in a lawsuit, and specifically a lawsuit with a co-founder and someone that you've worked with over the years. So everything that we're trying to do is avoid that situation. And the better that you've prepared your documentation from, in anticipation of that potentiality, then you've done a good job as an executive. Mohammed, you've got the last word.
Yeah, well, I love being a founder. I think I enjoy a lot the fact that if I fail, I have nobody else to blame other than myself. So there's just a lot of empowerment in that. On the founder, the whole breakup, makeup, maybe as a lasting thought. Make sure that you focus your time and effort on the problems where you have the superpower. So if your superpower is engineering, make sure that in your company, you're focusing on engineering problems and hire the right people to solve all of the things that you really should not be thinking about, whether it's administrative, whether it's legal, whether it's HR, office management, etc. If you cannot afford to hire these people, at least get really good advice, because like these mistakes can cause you so much time and effort and money and pain and lack of sleep if you make them. So as a really good takeaway, take it from a guy who's been there, like اسأل مجرب and then ما تسألش دكتور. Like seriously, make sure to get the legal stuff and the contract stuff, the whole equity split, board, authorizations, valuation, done by people who know what they're doing, so that you can save yourself a lot of time and effort. And that's it.
Beautifully said. And just to close, this has been fast and furious. we only had half an hour here, but obviously this is, a conversation that continue on for an entire conference, frankly. So given the interest that we've seen, hopefully we'll be able to bring back and have a special panel dedicated to this conversation over a longer time form. But with that, we'll go ahead and close. We're at our scheduled time. Please do reach out to Bassel, Emna, and Muhammad, and myself if you do have any questions. They're incredibly experienced. They've got the wisdom that you need, and to Muhammad's point, having been mjarrib, having had that experience, it's 1,000 times better than the theoretical responses that you can get from your friends that haven't done it and haven't been part of these difficult journey in establishing a startup and growing to the success that these three have enjoyed. So thank you to our distinguished panel for your time and for your comments and your energy. Looking forward to connecting offline, and we'll go ahead and close the panel.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.